There's a small intersection on the edge of town where the old highway meets a dead-end street. It's the kind of place you drive past 100 times without really seeing it. I must have passed it for years without noticing anything unusual. But one night, when the rain came down hard enough to blur the world into streaks of gray and light, I saw a glow there that shouldn't have been. A store. It wasn't there before. I was sure of that. It sat between two old brick buildings that had long been empty, with a faded awning and large windows fogged from the inside. The sign above the door read, "Only Store," in flaking white paint. But what made me stop the car wasn't the sign. It was the light inside, dim, yellow, flickering as though the bulbs were half alive. At first I thought it might be one of those pop-up antique shops or maybe a film set, but there were no cars, no people, just that single building breathing light into the downpour. I pulled over. I don't know why. Maybe curiosity. Maybe something else. When I stepped out, the rain didn't sound normal. It hit the pavement in a steady rhythm, too even, too deliberate. I felt the weight of it pressing against me as I crossed the street. The closer I got, the stranger it felt, like the sound was coming from inside the store rather than the sky. The door opened on its own when I reached for it. A soft chime echoed somewhere above, dull and metallic. The air smelled of damp wood and dust, but there was another scent beneath it, something sweet and old, like flowers left too long in water. Inside, it looked ordinary at first. Narrow aisles, shelves lined with random things. Not groceries, not hardware, just things. Old photographs, clocks that didn't tick, toys missing eyes, jars filled with cloudy liquid and floating shapes I couldn't make out. A radio sat on the counter playing faint static, and I could almost hear words in it if I listened too long. There was no one behind the counter. I waited, expecting someone to appear from the back. But the longer I stood there, the more wrong the silence felt. It wasn't empty silence. It was heavy, like the store itself was holding its breath. I turned toward the door, ready to leave. But through the fogged window, the street outside looked different. The lights from passing cars were gone. Even the sound of rain had changed. It was still falling, but I couldn't tell where from. I stepped closer and wiped the glass with my sleeve. There was no street outside anymore. Only darkness, shifting like water. Then something moved in the reflection behind me. Just a flicker at first, like a shadow bending at an angle that shouldn't exist. I turned quickly, heart pounding. Nothing there, just aisles stretching further than they had before. I could swear the shelves were longer now, the aisles deeper. I called out then, though I didn't know what for. My voice sounded small. It didn't echo. I started toward the back, thinking maybe someone was there. The floor creaked beneath me, but the sound wasn't right. It was delayed, like it came a fraction of a second after each step. There was a curtain at the back. Behind it, faint light pulsed, slow, steady. I hesitated, but curiosity won again. When I pushed the curtain aside, I saw a single room, small and empty except for a table in the center. On it sat an old cash register, and beside it, a single object wrapped in brown paper. My name was written on it. I didn't touch it. I couldn't. The air around it felt charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. I backed away slowly, letting the curtain fall closed. Then I ran. When I burst through the front door, the rain hit me hard again. The street was back. The cars. The lights. Everything as it should be. I turned to look behind me, to prove to myself the store was real. It wasn't there. Just two dark buildings, side by side, with nothing between them but rain. I drove home shaking. I told myself it was exhaustion or a trick of the weather. But that night, as I sat awake listening to the rain against my window, I heard the faint sound of a bell. Dull, metallic, echoing somewhere far away. And I realized it was the same sound that had chimed when I stepped through the door of that store. Part 2. The thing that waits inside it happened again a week later. Another storm, same hour, same stretch of road. I wasn't looking for it this time. I'd avoided that route completely. But the rain was so heavy that night that the highway ahead blurred to nothing, and my GPS rerouted me along the side streets. I didn't realize where I was until I saw that same yellow glow in the distance. The store. It looked identical. Same flickering lights, same crooked sign. The space between the two old buildings had filled again, like the structure had grown out of the storm itself. I stopped the car, though I swore I wouldn't. My chest tightened, a mix of dread and something else, something that felt like being called. The door opened before I even touched it. The chime rang again, dull and perfect. Inside, everything was exactly as I remembered. The aisles, the smell, the radio whispering static. But this time, there was someone behind the counter. A man. Or at least, that's what I thought at first. He was tall, thin, his skin gray like wet paper. His eyes were too small for his face, sunken and still. When he smiled, it didn't reach them. He spoke softly, his voice slow and even, like he hadn't used it in a long time. He asked if I'd found what I was looking for. I told him I wasn't buying anything, that I'd come in by mistake. His smile widened too much. He nodded like he understood, but his eyes never left mine. Then he said something that froze me completely. He said I'd left something behind last time. I asked him what he meant. He turned slightly, and behind him on the counter was the same brown paper package from before. My name still written across it in uneven black ink. He pushed it toward me. The paper dried despite the damp air. The smell of old flowers filled the room again. I reached out almost without meaning to, but then I stopped. There was movement under the paper, slow, shifting like something alive. I told him I didn't want it. He tilted his head, his smile fading. The lights flickered once, twice, and the sound of the rain outside stopped completely. The air felt thick, too heavy to breathe. Then he said, still in that slow, calm voice, that I'd already bought it. I backed away, my pulse hammering. The shelves around me seemed closer now, bending inward. I turned toward the door, but there was only blackness through the glass again, rippling like before. The chime sounded again, though I hadn't moved. I looked back. The man was gone. Only the package sat there, the paper slowly tearing from the inside. I ran again, through the door, into the rain, into the world that was supposed to make sense. But as I drove home, something felt wrong. The sound of the rain against the windshield was off. It didn't hit from outside. It echoed from underneath the car, from within the engine, from places it shouldn't. When I finally got home and stepped out, I could still smell that sweet, rotting scent clinging to my clothes. And when I reached my front porch, there was something waiting by the door. A small brown paper package, my name written across it in black ink. The package sat on my porch all night untouched. I stood at the window for hours watching it through the thin curtain as the rain continued to fall. I tried to convince myself it was a prank or a mistake, that someone had seen me stop at the old intersection and decided to play a cruel joke. But the longer I stared at that package, the more certain I became that it wasn't left by human hands. It didn't get wet, even though the rain never stopped. Every drop that hit the steps vanished before touching it, sliding off some invisible barrier that kept the paper perfectly dry. By morning, The rain had stopped. The street outside shimmered with puddles, but the air still smelled heavy and sweet, that same floral decay from inside the store. When I finally opened the door, the package was still there. My name written again in that uneven black scrawl. I thought of calling someone then, maybe the police, maybe a friend, but what could I even say? That a store appeared out of nowhere and sold me something I didn't buy. I crouched down and reached for it, half expecting it to vanish. It didn't. It was real, solid, warm. I carried it inside and placed it on the kitchen table. The wrapping paper was old, coarse, and when I pressed my fingers against it, it felt faintly damp from the inside. There was movement beneath the folds, small but deliberate, like something breathing very slowly. My stomach twisted. I should have thrown it away. I should have burned it. But instead, I stood there frozen, listening to that faint movement until it stopped. When the silence came, it felt worse. I unwrapped it. Inside was a small wooden box, carved with symbols I didn't recognize. The surface was worn smooth, as if countless hands had touched it before mine. There was no lock, no hinges, just a seam down the middle where it could be opened. I didn't want to, but my hands moved on their own. Inside was a folded photograph. It was a picture of the store, but not how I'd seen it. In the photograph, the sky above it was black, the windows unlit, and there was something in the doorway. A shadow with the faint outline of a face that was almost, but not quite, human. And there, near the bottom corner of the photo, something scrawled in that same uneven ink, "You're inside." I dropped it immediately. The box hit the floor and cracked open wider. Something dark seeped out, not liquid, but not solid either, like smoke that moved with purpose. It crept toward the walls, clinging to corners, sliding into the narrow cracks of the house. The smell grew stronger, heavy and sickly sweet. I grabbed the box and shoved it into the trash bin, taking it outside to the alley behind my house. I didn't look back, but as I closed the lid, I heard a sound I still can't describe, like a sigh, drawn out and deep, as if something inside the box was relieved to be free. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house seemed magnified. The ticking of the clock slowed until it no longer matched the second hand's movement. The refrigerator hummed at a lower tone, like it was breathing. And at some point past midnight, I began to hear faint creaks moving through the walls, slow, deliberate, like footsteps circling the house. I got out of bed and checked every room. Nothing. No sign of anyone. Yet when I passed the kitchen window, I froze. The alley light was flickering, and the trash bin where I'd left the box was tipped over. The paper wrapping lay beside it, torn open, empty. I closed all the blinds, locked every door. Still, the noises didn't stop. They grew softer but closer. When I pressed my ear against the wall by my bed, I could hear whispering low, rhythmic, impossible to make out, but my name was somewhere in it. By morning, the air in the house felt wrong. Heavy like humidity, but colder, stale. When I stepped into the kitchen, there was something on the table again. The wooden box. Clean. Polished. No crack. No photograph. Only a faint outline on the wood that looked like a fingerprint, too long and too thin to be human. The rain began again just as I stared at it. And outside, through the curtain, I saw that same yellow light flicker once in the distance. The store had returned, and this time it was waiting for me. I didn't go to the store that night, but it didn't seem to matter. The rain fell harder than before, drumming against the roof in heavy, endless rhythm. The yellow light through the curtains grew brighter, closer, as though the store wasn't across the street anymore, but pressed right up against my home. I stood at the window, trying to see through the rain, but the darkness behind the glass was too thick. I couldn't make out the outline of anything, only that strange, pulsing glow seeping through like it was alive. The wooden box was still on the table where I had left it, dry despite the condensation that now coated everything else. It hadn't moved, but the air around it shimmered faintly, as if a layer of heat or light bent above it. Every few minutes, I thought I heard the faint scrape of something moving inside, but it would stop the second I looked at it directly. I couldn't eat. I couldn't think. My house no longer felt like mine. Around midnight, I decided to get rid of the box once and for all. I put on my coat, grabbed it without looking, and went outside into the downpour. The street was empty, slick, and silent except for the rain. No cars, no wind. Even the sound of the rain felt wrong, as though it wasn't hitting the ground but falling through something invisible. I made my way to the end of the street, toward the bridge where the trash bins were. But the farther I walked, the less sense the street made. The houses on either side seemed darker, smaller, their windows reflecting nothing. The yellow light followed behind me. When I turned, it wasn't a street light. It was the faint glow of the store's sign, floating above the pavement, shifting closer with every blink. I ran. The rain stung my face like needles. My shoes slapped against the soaked asphalt, splashing through puddles that rippled with shapes that didn't belong to me. The more I ran, the louder the sound became, footsteps echoing mine but heavier, slower, deliberate. When I reached the corner where the street should have opened to the bridge, I stopped. The bridge was gone. The road just turned back onto itself. I was back in front of my house. The yellow light burned brighter now, right across the street. The store stood there, doors open, the sign flickering in the rain. I could see the faint shapes moving inside, shadows that didn't match any human form. Long, crooked, twisting shapes that turned even when I didn't. And in the middle of the doorway, a figure stood watching. It wasn't tall or short, not quite male or female, but I could see its eyes even from across the road, wide, dark, unblinking. It raised one arm and pointed directly at me. Then it turned and went inside. Without thinking, I followed. The rain stopped the instant I stepped onto the cracked pavement in front of the store. The air was dry still. I could hear nothing but my own breathing. The inside looked exactly as it had before, shelves, aisles, dim light. But something was different. There was no dust this time, no sense of abandonment. The floor was freshly cleaned, gleaming faintly, and the counter at the far end wasn't empty anymore. The old man was there, the same one I'd seen on my first visit. His hands rested flat on the surface, his eyes open but motionless. His skin had the same gray pallor as the walls, like he'd been part of the place all along. I wanted to ask where I was, why this was happening, but the words never came. My throat refused to work. He raised his hand and pointed to the shelf beside me. On it sat a single item, the wooden box, the same one I tried to throw away twice now. Only this time, it wasn't closed. The lid was open, and something was moving inside. I took a step closer. Inside the box, I saw water. Not a reflection, not a trick of light, actual water, dark and rippling. Beneath the surface were faces, faint, shifting, pressed against the inside like they were trapped behind glass. Their mouths opened and closed, forming silent words I couldn't hear. Then the water began to rise. The old man spoke. His voice wasn't a sound, so much as a vibration, a pressure in the air that crawled into my chest. He said one thing, 3 words, and though I don't know the language, I understood the meaning. It meant you shouldn't have looked. The lights flickered. The air bent. When I blinked, I was standing outside again, soaked, the store gone. The box lay at my feet, closed once more. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those faces beneath the water. I knew one of them was mine. The following day was bright, painfully so, but I barely noticed. My body moved through the motions of living, coffee, shower, sitting at the table, but my mind stayed tangled somewhere else. The box sat near the sink, wrapped in a towel that did nothing to stop the faint dampness that bled through the fabric. I tried to ignore it, but even when I turned my back, I could sense the pull of it, like something behind me breathing in rhythm with my own lungs. By evening, the weather began to turn again. I could smell rain before it even touched the ground, that sharp, electric scent that made my stomach twist. I told myself not to look outside, not to check if the light was there. But when the first droplet hit the window, my body moved on its own. I stepped to the glass and froze. Across the street, the faint yellow glow returned. But the store itself wasn't there this time. The light hovered where it should have been, rippling faintly, casting distorted reflections across the wet road. And in the reflection on my window, behind my own face, I saw movement. It was subtle at first, just a faint outline of someone standing behind me. I turned. The room was empty. When I faced the window again, the shape was closer. Its reflection stood shoulder to shoulder with mine, though I could see nothing beside me in the room. The surface of the glass rippled faintly, as if my reflection and the thing beside it were trapped beneath a thin layer of water. The light outside flickered. For a heartbeat, it became the outline of a door. I could almost see through it, rows of shelves, the shape of the counter, and the dark figure standing behind it. The same one from before, waiting, and then, just as suddenly, the light blinked out. The rain kept falling. That night, I dreamed of the store again. I was walking down an aisle lined with hundreds of the same wooden boxes. They weren't closed. Inside each one floated faces familiar, yet not. People I passed on the street, people from the news, and in the last one, my own. My reflection in the water smiled even though I didn't. I tried to back away, but the shelves closed around me like a coffin, and a hand rose out of the water, reaching for me. I woke gasping, my hand wet and cold. The towel around the box was gone, and the lid was slightly open. Drops of water trailed across the table, leading toward the hallway. I followed them, each step heavier than the last. The trail led to the front door, where it stopped. When I touched the handle, it felt like touching something alive, warm, pulsing. I jerked my hand back, but then the knocking began. 3 slow knocks, then silence. I stood frozen. The knocks came again, this time softer, more deliberate, as though whoever or whatever was on the other side knew I was listening. My mind screamed not to open it, but the sound of water trickling just beyond the door was unbearable. Against all reason, I turned the knob. The door opened to rain, heavy and cold, but no one stood there. Only the faint hum of distant thunder and the scent of wet asphalt. I stepped out, and my feet splashed into something deeper than puddles. Water pooled ankle-high across the porch, rippling as if disturbed by unseen movement. And then I heard it, a faint voice, distorted, echoing beneath the rain. It called my name. It came from across the street. The light had returned, brighter than ever. The store stood whole again, the door open wide, the sign glowing faintly. I could see the figure at the counter, hand raised, beckoning. This time, I didn't run. I walked toward it, each step heavy, rain soaking me through. When I reached the entrance, I hesitated only for a second before stepping inside. The air was warm and thick, filled with the scent of damp wood and sea salt. The shelves were empty now, except for one thing, the box sitting in the center of the floor. The figure was gone. The box trembled. The lid rose slightly, revealing darkness that didn't look like shadow but depth, like a hole into something endless. Inside, I saw the faint reflection of the street outside, only it wasn't raining there. The houses looked wrong, tilted, their windows filled with faces staring out. I reached down before I could stop myself. My fingers brushed the surface, and I felt water. Cold. Then I saw it, my reflection staring back, only it smiled while I didn't. Its mouth opened wider until it split across the face, and a hand emerged from the reflection, gripping my wrist. I don't remember how I got out. One moment I was falling into that black surface, the next I was lying in the street, the store gone, the rain gone, the night perfectly still. The box sat beside me, closed tight. I brought it inside. I didn't know what else to do. It sits now on the table again, dry as bone, as if it had never touched water. But tonight, the forecast says rain. I don't know why I keep writing this down. Maybe it's a way to make sense of what's happening, or maybe I'm hoping that if someone finds these words later, they'll understand that I didn't lose my mind. Something has been happening to me since the night I stepped into that store. Something that doesn't belong in this world. For a few days after that night, it didn't rain. The air felt heavy, still like the whole town was holding its breath. I barely left the house. The box sat on my table, same as before, plain, wooden, unmarked. Sometimes I thought I heard faint sloshing sounds coming from it. But when I lifted the lid, there was nothing. Just a dry wooden interior. Still, it felt wrong to touch it, like it remembered me. Then, on the 5th day, the rain came again. I heard it first before I even saw the clouds. A steady pattering against the roof, slow and deliberate, like footsteps circling the house. While I looked out the window, the street was washed in silver. Across the road, the light was there. Brighter, clearer. The store had returned. But this time, the sign above the door wasn't empty. It said open in uneven, hand-painted letters. I should have run, but I didn't. Something in me wanted to see it again. Needed to. I grabbed my coat, shoved the box inside my pocket, and stepped into the rain. It soaked through my clothes in seconds, but the air was strangely warm. When I crossed the street, the rain stopped hitting me. It was falling all around, but not on me. The store door stood wide open, and from inside came a smell that froze my stomach. Salt. Old. Deep old water. The man at the counter was waiting. I could see him clearly this time, tall, thin, skin like damp paper stretched over bone. His eyes were wide, dark too still. He smiled when I stepped in, but his mouth didn't move naturally. The corners stretched a little too far. I told him I wanted to know what the store was. His head tilted slightly, and his voice came not from his lips, but from everywhere. You came back. They always come back. I want to turn around, but the door behind me was gone. Where it had been was only a wall lined with shelves. The room was filled with boxes identical to the one I carried. I realized then that every box hummed faintly, and from each one came the same slow drip of water. What's inside them? I asked, though my voice barely made a sound. He stepped from behind the counter, each footstep rippling the wooden floor like it was the surface of a pond. Memories, he said, of those who entered before you. The ocean keeps what it touches. He reached out a hand. pale and trembling. "Show me yours." Before I could react, the box in my pocket began to move. It vibrated, pulling itself free, and when it hit the floor, it split open. Water poured out, not splashing, but flowing upward, spiraling, forming a shape. I saw myself in it, reflected perfectly, but not mimicking me. The reflection smiled. I didn't. Then it reached toward me, and its fingers broke through the surface, cold as death. I stumbled back, but the man caught me. His grip was soft but unyielding. "You took what wasn't yours," he said. "You saw the store when you weren't meant to. It only appears to those who belong to the rain." The water rose around us. The shelves disappeared beneath it. I tried to scream, but when I opened my mouth, water filled my lungs. The man's face dissolved, his skin peeling into waves, and all that was left were eyes, thousands of them, floating in the dark, watching as I sank deeper. Then I woke. I was lying on the floor of my kitchen, soaked to the bone. The clock on the wall was still ticking. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the street was empty. I thought it was a nightmare until I saw the puddle. It wasn't a normal puddle. It was deep, too deep. When I leaned closer, I saw not my reflection, but waves. Real, moving waves, crashing silently against an unseen shore. The box was gone. Every time it rains now, I see the light again. Not always across the street. Sometimes it flickers from the window, or from the reflection in a puddle, or even from the dark of the sink. Once, I swear I heard the faint ding of a door chime coming from inside my walls. I tried to leave town last week. I packed my things and drove for hours, but the highway never ended. The same stretch of wet road repeated endlessly until the rain started again and the light appeared on the horizon. I pulled over and realized the store was waiting for me. Just off the road, the door already open. I didn't go inside. Not yet, but I know I will. Sooner or later, I'll have to, because every night now, even when it's dry, I hear dripping from somewhere beneath the floorboards. When I close my eyes, I see dark water rising behind them. And sometimes, when the room is completely silent, I hear my reflection whispering from inside the glass, asking if I'm ready to come back. The store opens only when it rains, and the forecast says there's a storm coming tonight.